The cruelest thing about being invisible is that people stop believing you have a heart. The silver tray trembled slightly in my hands as I crossed the marble foyer of the Hawthorne estate, but nobody noticed. Nobody ever noticed me. Not when I arrived before sunrise. Not when I stayed long after midnight polishing floors that reflected crystal chandeliers worth more than I could earn in 10 lifetimes. And definitely not when I quietly fixed the mistakes everyone else made. My name is Emily Carter. I was 24 years old, and for the past 3 years, I had worked as a maid in one of the largest private estates in New York. Outside, the November wind rattled the tall windows overlooking the Hudson River. Inside, warmth wrapped around the mansion like a velvet blanket. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the hallways while staff members rushed to prepare for an important arrival. Vincent Hawthorne was coming home. Even saying his name seemed to lower voices around the estate. The housekeepers whispered it. The driver spoke it carefully. The security team straightened whenever they heard it. Vincent Hawthorne owned businesses across the country. Luxury hotels. Real estate. Shipping companies. To the public, he was a billionaire businessman. To everyone inside these walls, he was simply the man who could change your life with a single decision. I adjusted my plain gray uniform and carried a stack of folded linens toward the West Wing. "Move faster, Emily," Mrs. Langley snapped as she swept past me. The head housekeeper never seemed capable of speaking at a normal volume. "Mr. Hawthorne arrives in 6 hours. Everything must be perfect." "Yes, ma'am." She didn't wait for my response. Nobody ever did. By noon, my feet ached inside shoes that had seen better years. I had polished banisters, cleaned guest rooms, and reorganized storage closets. While everyone else focused on impressing Vincent Hawthorne, I focused on staying out of trouble. Experience had taught me that being noticed usually meant being blamed. I was carrying fresh towels through the garden corridor when I heard it. Soft crying. Barely audible. I stopped. The sound came again. A child. Setting the towels aside, I followed the noise through a maze of hedges until I reached the far end of the estate gardens. There, sitting alone beside a stone fountain, was a little boy. He couldn't have been older than 7. Dark hair. Pale skin. Expensive clothes. Tears rolled silently down his cheeks as he stared at the ground. "Hey," I said gently. "You okay?" He didn't answer. He didn't even look up. I crouched a few feet away, careful not to scare him. Getting lost around here is easy. Happens to me all the time. Nothing. Just silence. The wind carried golden leaves across the path between us. Most children eventually spoke. This boy didn't. But something about the sadness in his eyes made my chest tighten. Slowly, I pulled a folded napkin from my apron pocket. With a pen, I drew a crooked smiley face and held it up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile exactly. More like the memory of one. It was enough. "There you are." A sharp voice shattered the moment. 2 security guards hurried toward us. Relief flooded their faces when they saw the child. One immediately knelt beside him. The other turned toward me. "Thank you," he said quickly. "We've been looking everywhere." I stood and brushed dirt from my uniform. "No problem." The little boy looked up then. His green eyes met mine for one brief second before the guards escorted him away. Strange. Something about that look stayed with me. I watched until they disappeared around the hedge. Then I picked up my towels and returned to work. I had no idea who the boy was. I had no idea that meeting him would change everything. And I certainly had no idea that somewhere beyond the estate gates, a black SUV had just turned onto the long private driveway, carrying the most powerful man I would ever know. The mansion felt different after Vincent Hawthorne arrived. Not louder. Not busier. Just sharper somehow, as if every employee suddenly remembered that one mistake could cost them everything. By sunrise the next morning, black SUVs lined the circular driveway, security staff moved through the hallways with quiet efficiency, and even Mrs. Langley seemed nervous. I was dusting a row of antique books in the East Library when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy. Measured. Confident. The kind that made everyone else move aside without being asked. I stepped away from the shelf immediately and lowered my eyes. A man in a charcoal suit crossed the room carrying a tablet. Another followed a few feet behind. Then a third. None of them spoke. They did not need to. The atmosphere around them said enough. Vincent Hawthorne was somewhere nearby. My heartbeat quickened for reasons I could not explain. I had worked at the estate for 3 years and somehow never crossed paths with him. Most of the staff rarely did. He traveled constantly. Entire wings of the mansion existed because of his wealth, yet he felt more like a rumor than a person. I finished my assignment and headed toward the service corridor. The scent of fresh bread drifted from the kitchens. Somewhere upstairs, a piano played softly. Everything appeared normal. Until I spotted a familiar face sitting alone near the conservatory entrance. The little boy from the garden. He sat on a window bench with a sketchbook resting in his lap. No security guards. No staff. Just him and a box of colored pencils. For a second I considered walking away. Then I noticed he was staring at a blank page without drawing anything. "Good morning," I said carefully. His green eyes lifted toward me. Recognition flashed across his face. I smiled. "Looks like you found your way back this time." Still no words. He simply watched me. Then he scooted slightly and patted the empty space beside him. I hesitated. Technically I was supposed to be working. But something about the loneliness in his expression reminded me of myself. I sat down. "That is a dangerous invitation," I whispered. "People might think I am important." For the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted. A real smile this time. Small but unmistakable. I picked up a blue pencil and drew the world's worst dog. Crooked legs. Giant ears. Uneven tail. The boy stared at it for 2 seconds before grabbing a green pencil and adding grass beneath it. Then a tree. Then clouds. We worked in silence. Somehow it felt easy. Comfortable. Like talking without needing words. A shadow suddenly fell across the page. "There you are, Noah." I looked up. A woman in an elegant navy suit stood nearby. Relief softened her face when she saw the child. Then her eyes shifted to me. "Miss Carter?" My stomach tightened. "Yes?" "Mr. Hawthorne would like to know why his nephew smiles whenever you are around." Every thought in my head disappeared at once. The boy beside me looked down at the drawing. But I noticed something then. His smile remained. And somewhere in the mansion beyond the conservatory doors, the most powerful man I had ever heard of was asking about me. My hands felt strangely cold as I followed the woman through a series of hallways I had cleaned hundreds of times but never truly seen. The deeper we moved into the private wing of the estate, the quieter everything became. The distant sounds of staff working faded away until all I could hear was the soft click of her heels against polished hardwood floors and the nervous rhythm of my own heartbeat. I kept wondering if I had done something wrong. Maybe spending time with Noah had violated some rule I did not know existed. Maybe I was about to lose the job that paid my rent and helped cover my mother's medical bills. The thought tightened my chest. We stopped outside a pair of dark wooden doors. The woman offered a reassuring smile. "Do not worry, Emily. You are not in trouble." That should have made me feel better. It did not. She opened the door. The office beyond looked more like a private museum than a workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river. Shelves lined with leather-bound books stretched across one wall. A massive fireplace glowed softly despite the afternoon sunlight. And standing near the windows was Vincent Hawthorne. Every rumor I had heard suddenly felt incomplete. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit. But it was not his appearance that caught my attention. It was the stillness. The quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being listened to the moment he spoke. He turned toward me. Sharp gray eyes studied me carefully. Not rudely. Not coldly. Simply observing. Emily Carter. My name sounded different in his voice. More important somehow. Yes, sir. You spent time with Noah today. It was not a question. Yes, sir. A long silence followed. I resisted the urge to look away. Do you know how many specialists have worked with him over the past 2 years? I shook my head. No, sir. 23. My stomach dropped. 23 experts. Therapists. Teachers. Consultants. People far more qualified than a maid. Vincent folded his hands behind his back. And yet he smiles when he is around you. I had no idea what to say. The truth felt too simple. I just treated him like a kid. For the first time, something softened in his expression. Not quite a smile. More like approval. Before he could respond, the office door opened. Mrs. Langley stepped inside carrying a clipboard. The moment her eyes landed on me, surprise flashed across her face. Then something else. Something less pleasant. Sir, the guest accommodations are ready. Vincent nodded. Thank you. Mrs. Langley remained standing there a second too long. Her gaze moved from me to Vincent and back again. I recognized that look. I had seen versions of it my entire life. Suspicion. Jealousy. Calculation. She left without another word. The room suddenly felt colder. Vincent returned his attention to me. You may go back to work, Emily. Relief washed through me. Thank you, sir. I turned toward the door. One more thing. I stopped. Spend time with Noah whenever you can. My breath caught. Sir? That was not a request. The words sounded firm, but there was kindness underneath them. I nodded and quietly left the office. As the door closed behind me, I missed the thoughtful look Vincent directed toward the river. I also missed the phone call Mrs. Langley made less than 10 minutes later. Standing alone in a service hallway, she lowered her voice and said, "We have a problem. The girl is getting attention." And for the first time since arriving at the Hawthorne estate, someone had decided I was a threat. The first sign that something had changed was how people stopped talking when I entered a room. At first I told myself I was imagining it. The Hawthorne estate employed dozens of people. Conversations started and stopped constantly. But after 3 days, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Housekeepers who used to complain openly suddenly lowered their voices. Kitchen staff exchanged glances when I walked past. Even the drivers seemed unusually interested in whatever happened to be on their phones whenever I approached. I tried to ignore it. That had always been my survival strategy. Keep your head down. Do your work. Go home. Unfortunately, attention has a way of creating enemies. Especially when you never asked for it. Noah became part of my daily routine. Every afternoon, after finishing my assigned duties, I spent 30 minutes with him in the conservatory. Sometimes we drew pictures. Sometimes we played simple board games. Sometimes we just sat together watching the river beyond the glass walls. He still rarely spoke, but he smiled more often now. The first time I heard him laugh, I nearly dropped an entire tray of teacups. It was a small sound. Brief. But real. One of the security guards actually looked shocked. Word traveled quickly through the estate. Faster than I realized. One afternoon, I was arranging fresh flowers in the formal dining room when a woman I had never met entered with 2 assistants trailing behind her. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a luxury magazine. Elegant cream-colored coat. Diamond earrings. Perfect posture. The kind of confidence money seemed to buy. Her eyes swept across the room before settling on me. "You are Emily?" The question sounded polite. The tone did not. "Yes, ma'am." Her smile never reached her eyes. "I have heard quite a lot about you." Something about those words made my stomach tighten. Before I could answer, one of her assistants stepped forward and handed her a folder. She barely glanced at it. "Vincent speaks highly of Noah's recent progress." There it was. The reason she was here. I suddenly understood. This woman knew Vincent well enough to use his first name. Well enough to care where his attention was directed. "I am happy Noah is doing better," I said honestly. Her gaze sharpened. As if she had expected something else. "How admirable." The compliment felt strangely cold. She left a few moments later, but the uncomfortable feeling remained. That evening, while cleaning a guest suite, I found Mrs. Langley standing inside the doorway. Watching me. "Everything all right?" I asked. "Of course." Her smile appeared instantly. Too instantly. "Just making sure valuable items are being handled carefully." I frowned. "I always handle them carefully." "Good." She looked around the room before leaving. The next morning, an expensive sapphire bracelet disappeared from one of the guest bedrooms. By lunchtime, everyone in the mansion knew about it. By dinner, people were already whispering names. And for reasons I could not understand, every conversation seemed to stop the moment I walked into the room. The accusation arrived like a winter storm. Quiet at first. Then impossible to escape. By the next morning, I could feel it in every glance. Every conversation that stopped when I entered a room. Every polite smile that vanished the second I turned away. The missing bracelet had become the only thing anyone wanted to talk about. I stood at the laundry station folding freshly pressed sheets when two housekeepers walked past. They lowered their voices, but not enough. She was in the guest wing. So were dozens of people. Maybe. But funny how things started disappearing after she became everyone's favorite. My hands froze over the linen. Favorite. If only they knew how ridiculous that sounded. I was still the maid nobody noticed unless something needed cleaning. At least that was what I kept telling myself. Around noon, Mrs. Langley summoned me to her office. The moment I stepped inside, my stomach tightened. 3 members of the estate management team sat around the conference table. A jewelry box rested in the center. Empty. Waiting. Mrs. Langley folded her hands. "Emily, we need to ask you a few questions." The room suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. "Of course." "Yesterday afternoon, were you assigned to the Hawthorne guest suites?" "Yes." "Did you enter suite 4? "Yes." "Were you alone?" I nodded. Every answer seemed to make someone write something down. The scratching of pens sounded louder than it should have. "Did you see the bracelet?" "No." Mrs. Langley leaned back in her chair. "Several employees reported seeing you near the room shortly before it was discovered missing." I stared at her. "Because I was cleaning it." "Exactly." Something in her voice felt rehearsed. Like she had already decided how this conversation would end. The questions continued for nearly 20 minutes. Where had I been? Who had I spoken to? What time had I left the suite? By the end, my head hurt. My throat felt dry. And I realized something terrifying. Nobody in that room was trying to find the bracelet. They were trying to find someone to blame. When the meeting finally ended, I stepped into the hallway and nearly collided with Noah. He stood there holding his sketchbook against his chest. One of his security escorts lingered several feet away. Noah studied my face carefully. Then he opened the sketchbook. On the page was a drawing of the conservatory. The river. The trees. And me sitting beside him. Underneath, written in uneven handwriting, were 2 words. Good friend. My vision blurred instantly. For a moment, all the whispers and suspicion disappeared. I smiled and gently squeezed his shoulder. "Thank you." He smiled back. Then the elevator doors opened. Vincent Hawthorne stepped into the hallway. The conversation around us died immediately. His gaze moved from Noah to the sketchbook and finally to me. Something unreadable flickered across his expression. Before anyone could speak, Mrs. Langley appeared behind him carrying a folder. "Sir," she said carefully, "there has been a development regarding the missing bracelet." The confidence in her voice made my pulse stumble. Because for the first time I realized someone was not merely suspecting me anymore. Someone was preparing evidence. The evidence appeared an hour later. I remember the exact sound my heart made when Mrs. Langley placed the sapphire bracelet on the conference table. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was simply the sound of hope cracking. Every person in the room stared at the glittering blue stones resting against black velvet. For a moment, I could not even breathe. "This was discovered inside Emily Carter's locker," Mrs. Langley announced. Her voice carried the calm certainty of someone presenting a solved equation. My knees felt weak. "That is impossible." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. I did not take it. No one answered. One manager avoided my eyes completely. Another shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The silence hurt more than any accusation. Because silence meant they had already decided. Mrs. Langley opened a folder and slid several photographs across the table. Images of my locker. Images of the bracelet. Images of security staff standing nearby during the search. Everything looked official. Organized. Final. "I have worked here for 3 years," I whispered. "You know me." "We thought we did," Mrs. Langley replied. The disappointment in her voice sounded rehearsed. I looked toward Vincent. Throughout the entire meeting, he had said almost nothing. His expression remained unreadable as he studied the photographs. Not angry. Not convinced. Just thinking. Somehow that uncertainty gave me a tiny spark of hope. "Sir," I said quietly. "I did not steal anything." Gray eyes lifted toward mine. For one brief second, the room disappeared. The managers. The photographs. The bracelet. Everything. There was only that look. Careful. Observant. Measuring. Then Vincent lowered his gaze back to the evidence. "The investigation will continue." My stomach dropped. Investigation. Not innocence. Not trust. Investigation. The meeting ended shortly afterward. By sunset, rumors had spread through every corner of the estate. Some employees openly stared as I walked past. Others pretended not to see me at all. The loneliness felt crushing. I packed my belongings after dinner. A few uniforms. Family photographs. Medical bills I could never seem to escape. My entire life fit into one worn suitcase. Outside, rain tapped softly against the mansion windows. Noah found me near the staff entrance. His sketchbook hung loosely at his side. He looked from the suitcase to my face and immediately understood something was wrong. The sadness in his eyes nearly broke me. I forced a smile. "It is okay." It was a terrible lie. He stepped closer and grabbed my sleeve. For a moment, I thought he might speak. Instead, he simply held on. As if letting go would somehow make everything real. Tears burned behind my eyes. "You are going to be okay, Noah." His fingers tightened slightly before finally releasing the fabric. I walked outside carrying the suitcase myself. No farewell party. No thank you. No defense. Just rain and silence. The estate gates seemed farther away than ever. Halfway down the driveway, I glanced back one final time. A light glowed in an office window on the second floor. A tall figure stood beside the glass, watching the storm. watching me leave. And for reasons I could not explain, Vincent Hawthorne did not look like a man who believed the story everyone else had accepted. The rain followed me all the way home. By the time I reached my apartment building, the cuffs of my jeans were soaked and my suitcase wheels rattled across the cracked sidewalk like they were announcing my failure to the entire neighborhood. My mother was asleep when I stepped inside. The small oxygen machine beside her bed hummed softly in the darkness. I stood there for a long moment watching her breathe, trying to decide whether telling her the truth would hurt more than lying. In the end, I said nothing. The next morning, I woke before sunrise out of habit. For 3 years, every day had begun with schedules, cleaning assignments, and endless responsibilities. Now there was only silence. The emptiness felt heavier than exhaustion ever had. Meanwhile, 30 miles away, the Hawthorne estate was anything but quiet. Vincent Hawthorne sat alone in his office staring at the investigation file spread across his desk. The bracelet rested beside a stack of photographs. Everything appeared straightforward. Too straightforward. That was the problem. Vincent had built an empire by recognizing patterns. By noticing details other people missed. And the details in front of him refused to fit together. Emily Carter had worked at the estate for 3 years without a single complaint. No disciplinary reports. No financial irregularities. No history of dishonesty. Yet suddenly she had stolen an expensive bracelet days after attracting attention from people far above her station. The timing bothered him. A knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." One of his security directors entered carrying a tablet. "Sir, you asked for the original surveillance archive." Vincent nodded. "Leave it." After the man departed, Vincent began reviewing footage personally. Hour after hour. Hallways. Service entrances. Staff corridors. Most of it was routine. Boring. Predictable. Then he noticed something. Mrs. Langley. The head housekeeper appeared near the employee lockers nearly 40 minutes after her shift officially ended. Alone. Vincent leaned forward. The footage showed her glancing over both shoulders before entering the locker area. 3 minutes later, she emerged carrying nothing. At least nothing visible. Vincent replayed the clip twice. Then a third time. His expression darkened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Across the estate, Noah sat in the conservatory staring at an empty chair. The chair where Emily always sat. A box of colored pencils rested untouched beside him. One of the security guards tried offering a board game. Noah ignored it. Another employee attempted conversation. Nothing. The smile that had slowly returned over recent weeks disappeared completely. Late that afternoon, Vincent entered the conservatory. He found Noah sitting exactly where he had been 3 hours earlier. Motionless. Silent. Vincent lowered himself into the chair across from him. "You miss her?" Noah looked down at the sketchbook in his lap. Vincent rarely pushed. Rarely demanded. Especially with Noah. But today felt different. "I think she was telling the truth." Noah's head lifted immediately. Hope flashed across his face so quickly it hurt to see. Vincent stared at the drawings covering the pages. Pictures of gardens. Trees. Rivers. Emily. Always Emily. And for the first time since the investigation began, Vincent became absolutely certain of one thing. The wrong person had paid the price. The question was no longer whether Emily was innocent. The question was who had worked so hard to make her appear guilty. The truth surfaced on a Thursday afternoon. Not with a dramatic confession. Not with a grand revelation. Just a single overlooked detail that refused to stay buried. Vincent spent most of the morning reviewing security footage frame by frame. While other people searched for obvious answers, he searched for inconsistencies. Tiny cracks in stories that appeared perfect on the surface. That habit had made him successful. It had also made him dangerous to anyone hiding secrets. By noon, he had assembled a timeline. By 1 o'clock, he had found a second surveillance angle that management had somehow failed to include in the investigation file. And by 2 o'clock, Mrs. Langley was sitting across from him in the estate conference room. The head housekeeper looked confident when she entered. She looked considerably less confident after Vincent placed several printed images on the table. "Would you like to explain this?" he asked calmly. Mrs. Langley glanced at the photographs. The color immediately drained from her face. They showed her entering the employee locker area long after her shift had ended. They showed her carrying a small velvet pouch. The same style pouch used to store expensive jewelry belonging to estate guests. "Sir, I can explain." Vincent remained silent. The room suddenly felt very small. "I was checking employee lockers." "Without authorization?" No answer. "After hours?" Still nothing. Vincent folded his hands. "You helped lead an investigation against an innocent employee." Mrs. Langley's eyes darted toward the door. "Looking for an escape. Finding none." Eventually the truth emerged. Not all at once. Piece by piece. The wealthy woman who had visited the estate weeks earlier had complained about Emily receiving attention. She disliked seeing a maid become important within the household. Mrs. Langley had viewed Emily's growing connection with Noah as a threat to her authority. Resentment had become opportunity. Opportunity had become a plan. And Emily had become the easiest target. Vincent listened without interrupting. When the explanation finally ended, disappointment settled across his features. Not anger. Disappointment. Somehow that seemed worse. By evening, Mrs. Langley's employment with the estate was over. Several others who knowingly participated in the false accusations left with her. The staff gathered quietly throughout the mansion, exchanging stunned whispers. Few had expected the truth to arrive so quickly. Even fewer expected Vincent to act so decisively. Yet the greatest surprise came later. Noah sat in the conservatory staring at the river when Vincent entered carrying the familiar sketchbook. The pages flipped slowly beneath his fingers. Drawing after drawing featured Emily. Smiling. Reading. Sitting beside Noah. Being present. Something most adults had failed to do. Vincent stopped at the final page. A new drawing covered the paper. A simple picture of the estate gates. Rain falling from dark clouds. Emily walking away alone with her suitcase. Vincent stared at it for several seconds. Then he heard a sound. Soft. Hesitant. Almost impossible to believe. Noah's voice. The first word spoken aloud in years. Emily. The single word barely rose above a whisper. But it struck Vincent harder than any speech. Noah lowered his eyes immediately afterward, as though surprised by his own voice. Vincent felt something shift inside him. The truth had cleared Emily's name. That was no longer in question. But another realization followed close behind. Emily had not only been innocent. She had been important. More important than anyone had understood. And as the evening lights reflected across the river beyond the glass, Vincent made a decision. Tomorrow he would find her. No matter where she was. The knock on my apartment door came at exactly 8:12 on Saturday morning. I remember because I had been staring at a stack of unpaid medical bills spread across the kitchen table. Numbers blurred together after a while. Prescription costs. Specialist appointments. Follow-up treatments. Every page felt heavier than the last. My mother sat by the window wrapped in a blanket, pretending not to worry. We had both become very good at pretending. "I will get another job," I told her. "Everything will be fine." She smiled softly. Neither of us believed it. The knock came again. Firm. Polite. Unexpected. I opened the door expecting a delivery driver or maybe a neighbor. Instead, I found a man in a dark suit standing in the hallway. Behind him waited a black SUV. My stomach tightened immediately. For one irrational second, I thought something terrible had happened. Miss Carter? Yes. Mr. Hawthorne would like to speak with you. The world seemed to stop moving. No. The answer surprised even me. The man blinked. Excuse me? I said no. His expression remained professional, but I could tell he had not expected resistance. Most people probably did not refuse Vincent Hawthorne. I closed the door before he could answer. My hands shook afterward. Not from fear. From disappointment. Because part of me had hoped. Hoped someone would defend me before I lost everything. Hoped someone would believe me before I walked away in the rain carrying my entire life in a suitcase. That hope was gone now. 3 hours later, I started my shift at a small neighborhood diner 6 blocks away. The pay was less than half what I earned at the estate. The hours were longer. The customers were impatient. None of it mattered. I needed income. By late afternoon, my feet hurt and my smile felt glued in place. Table 7 needs coffee, the manager called. I grabbed the pot and headed across the room. Halfway there, I froze. Vincent Hawthorne sat alone near the window. Every conversation around him seemed quieter somehow. Not because people recognized him. Because his presence filled the room without effort. He looked completely out of place among chipped coffee mugs and faded vinyl booths. Yet somehow the diner looked more important simply because he was inside it. I considered turning around. Instead, I walked over. "What are you doing here?" I asked. Vincent set down his coffee cup. "Looking for you." "You found me." "Yes." The silence stretched between us. Outside, sunlight reflected off passing cars. Inside, neither of us moved. Finally, Vincent spoke. "You were innocent." The words should have felt satisfying. Instead, they hurt. "I know." His jaw tightened slightly. "The investigation uncovered evidence. After I lost my job. Emily. After everyone believed the worst about me. The pain I had been carrying for days suddenly felt impossible to hide." Vincent listened without interrupting. That somehow made it harder. "Mrs. Langley and the others are gone," he said quietly. "Your name has been cleared." I laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because it was too late. That does not give me back what happened. For the first time, Vincent had no immediate answer. He looked out the diner window for several seconds before turning back toward me. "Then let me try to make it right." And for the first time since leaving the estate, I realized he had not come because he felt responsible. He had come because leaving things broken bothered him almost as much as it bothered me. For the next 3 days, Vincent Hawthorne appeared everywhere. Not in an overwhelming way. Not with grand gestures. Just enough to make ignoring him impossible. The first time, he quietly paid for every prescription my mother needed that month. I only discovered it when the pharmacist handed me a receipt showing a balance of $0. The second time, he arranged an interview at one of his hotels after hearing my diner manager complain that I deserved something better. I declined. The third time, he showed up at the diner again carrying a folder. "You are making this difficult," I told him as I poured coffee into a customer's mug. "I have been told that before." Somehow his calm answer irritated me even more. After my shift ended, I sat across from him in a small park near the river. Autumn leaves drifted across the walking path while families pushed strollers beneath the fading afternoon sunlight. It felt like a normal place. A place where billionaires and maids were not supposed to have conversations. Vincent handed me the folder. "What is this?" "A formal offer to return to the estate." I did not open it. "No." He looked almost disappointed. "You did not even read it." "I do not need to." Silence settled between us. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. A dog barked. Life continued around us while neither of us moved. Finally, Vincent leaned back slightly. "Noah misses you." The words hit harder than I expected. I stared at the river. "I miss him too." "Then come back." I shook my head. "You still do not understand." For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. "Then explain it to me." I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because nobody had asked me that question in a very long time. When people accused me, nobody stood beside me. Not one person. Vincent listened carefully. I lost my job. My reputation. My sense of belonging. Then everyone discovered I was innocent and suddenly I am supposed to walk back in like nothing happened. His jaw tightened. "I know I failed you." The honesty surprised me. Powerful people rarely admitted mistakes. "Do you?" I asked quietly. "Because you had the power to stop it." He looked away for a moment. The admission seemed to cost him something. I should have trusted my instincts. The wind lifted a strand of hair across my face. Neither of us spoke. Then Vincent said something I never expected to hear. "I am sorry, Emily." 3 simple words. No excuses. No justifications. Just regret. My throat tightened unexpectedly. I had imagined this moment dozens of times while lying awake at night. Yet now that it had arrived, I did not know what to do with it. "I cannot go back," I whispered. "Not yet." Vincent nodded slowly. He looked disappointed, but he did not argue. He simply stood. "Then I will wait." I frowned. "For what?" A faint smile touched his face. "For you to believe me." As he walked away, I realized something strange. Vincent Hawthorne was a man who could buy almost anything in the world. Influence. Property. Entire companies. Yet the one thing he wanted most at that moment was something money could never purchase. My trust. The trouble started so quietly that I almost missed it. At first it was just strange phone calls. Numbers I did not recognize. Silent connections that ended the moment I answered. Then came the questions. A customer at the diner asking where I used to work. A man outside my apartment building who seemed unusually interested in whether I still had connections to the Hawthorne estate. None of it made sense. I had spent most of my life being invisible. Suddenly people were paying attention. One rainy evening, I left work carrying a paper bag filled with groceries and a prescription refill for my mother. The city lights reflected across wet sidewalks while traffic crawled through downtown streets. Normally the walk home helped me think. That night it only made me uneasy. Twice I noticed the same dark sedan parked nearby. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was nothing. But by the time I reached my apartment building, my pulse felt unusually fast. The next morning, Vincent called. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello? Where are you?" No greeting. No introduction. Just immediate concern. "Good morning to you too, Emily." Something in his voice made me straighten. "What happened?" A pause. "Have you noticed anyone asking questions about you?" My stomach tightened instantly. "Why?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Because someone has been asking questions about Noah." The room suddenly felt colder. "What does that have to do with me?" "You were important to him." Vincent sounded frustrated. "Not with me. With the situation. There are people who pay attention when someone becomes important to my family." I sat down slowly. "You think this is connected?" "I do not know." That answer scared me more than certainty would have. Later that afternoon, I discovered just how serious his concern was. I returned home from the pharmacy and found my apartment door slightly open. Not damaged. Not forced. Just open. My breath caught instantly. I rushed inside. Everything appeared normal. The furniture remained untouched. My mother's belongings were exactly where they should be. Nothing valuable was missing. Yet someone had clearly been there. A framed photograph on the bookshelf sat at a different angle. A kitchen drawer remained partially open. Tiny details. The kind most people would overlook. I called Vincent before I called anyone else. The realization startled me. Somehow, without noticing, I had begun trusting him. Less than 20 minutes later, a black SUV stopped outside my building. Vincent entered the apartment himself. He moved through every room carefully before returning to the living room. His expression remained calm. Too calm. Someone searched this place. My throat tightened. Why? Vincent looked toward the window. Because they were looking for something. What? His eyes met mine. Or someone. Fear fluttered in my chest. Not panic. Something quieter. More dangerous. The feeling that events had begun moving beyond my control. Vincent stepped closer. You and your mother are not staying here tonight. Vincent, Emily. His voice softened. Please. The single word surprised me. Powerful men usually issued orders. They did not ask. Outside, thunder rolled across the evening sky. Inside, I realized he was not trying to control me. He was worried. And for the first time, I saw genuine fear in Vincent Hawthorne's eyes. That night, my mother and I moved into a guest residence on the edge of the Hawthorne estate. It was smaller than the main mansion but larger than any place I had ever lived. Fresh flowers sat on the kitchen table. The refrigerator was stocked. Clean blankets waited in every room. Someone had thought about comfort before we arrived. Somehow that made the situation feel even more unreal. I stood by the window watching rain slide down the glass while my mother slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Across the property, security lights glowed softly through the darkness. Everything looked calm. Safe. Yet I could not stop thinking about the open apartment door. About strangers searching through our belongings. About the worry I had seen in Vincent's eyes. The next morning, I woke to voices downstairs. Deep. Serious. Controlled. I followed the sound into the living room and found Vincent speaking with several members of his security team. The conversation stopped the moment I entered. One of the men immediately stepped away. Another closed a folder. Vincent looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying too many responsibilities at once. Good morning, I said. Did you sleep? He asked. A little. He nodded. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then I noticed Noah standing quietly near the fireplace. The moment he saw me, his entire expression brightened. He crossed the room and handed me a folded piece of paper. A drawing. Me. My mother. Noah. And Vincent standing together beneath a large tree. A family portrait created by a child who desperately wanted everyone he cared about in the same place. My throat tightened. Vincent saw the picture too. Neither of us commented on it. Some things felt too important to touch with words. Later that afternoon, the reason for all the concern finally became clear. One of Vincent's advisors arrived carrying new information. Someone connected to a business dispute had been gathering information about people close to the Hawthorne family. Names. Addresses. Daily routines. Nothing illegal had happened. Nothing directly threatening. But the pattern was troubling enough that Vincent had acted immediately. Listening from the doorway, I suddenly understood something. For weeks I had viewed Vincent's world from the outside. Expensive suits. Private estates. Endless influence. It looked effortless. Protected. Powerful. Now I saw the cost. Every decision carried consequences. Every relationship created vulnerabilities. Every person he cared about became someone he worried about. That realization changed something inside me. Because for the first time, I stopped seeing Vincent as an untouchable billionaire. I saw a man trying to protect the people he loved. That evening, Noah sat beside me in the conservatory while rain tapped gently against the glass roof overhead. He sketched quietly. I read a book. Peace settled around us. Then Noah surprised us both. He looked up from the page. Looked directly at me. And spoke clearly. Stay. One word. Simple. Honest. Precious. Tears instantly filled my eyes. Across the room, Vincent froze. Noah lowered his pencil. Please. The second word sounded stronger than the first. Hope flickered across Vincent's face so quickly it almost disappeared. But I saw it. For all his power, for all his resources, nothing mattered more to him in that moment than hearing Noah speak. And as I looked from the child to the man who loved him, I realized leaving again might be harder than staying. 3 weeks later, the Hawthorne estate looked exactly the same. The marble floors still gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. The garden still stretched toward the river. The staff still moved with quiet precision through endless hallways. Yet everything felt different. Maybe because I was different. I no longer walked through the estate trying to be invisible. I no longer measured my worth by whether other people noticed me. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The annual Hawthorne Foundation Gala filled the mansion with guests from across the country. Business leaders. Philanthropists. Politicians. People whose names appeared in magazines and on television. I stood near the ballroom entrance wearing a simple navy dress that one of the estate stylists had practically forced me to accept. Even now, being surrounded by so much luxury felt strange. My mother sat nearby laughing with several guests. Her health had improved dramatically over the past few weeks. The color had returned to her face. The constant worry lines had begun to fade. Seeing her smile felt like a gift I could never repay. Across the ballroom, Noah moved confidently between conversations, carrying a sketchbook beneath one arm. Every few minutes he stopped to speak with someone. Actual conversations. Complete sentences. Watching him felt almost miraculous. Then I noticed the room gradually growing quieter. Vincent had entered. He wore a black tuxedo that somehow made him look even more commanding than usual. Conversations paused. Attention shifted. Yet instead of greeting investors or donors first, he walked directly toward me. Hundreds of eyes followed him. My pulse immediately quickened. Vincent stopped in front of me. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he offered his hand. Walk with me. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. I placed my hand in his. Together we crossed the room toward the central stage. Confusion rippled through the crowd. I felt it. Heard it. Wondered what Vincent was doing. When we reached the stage, he turned toward the guests. His voice carried easily through the silence. A few months ago, someone standing beside me was judged unfairly. The room became perfectly still. Many people saw Maid. His fingers tightened gently around mine. I saw someone who never stopped putting others first. Someone who cared for my family when she had every reason to walk away. Someone whose character remained stronger than the lies told about her. Emotion tightened my throat. Vincent looked at me before continuing. There are moments in life when you realize something truly valuable has been standing in front of you all along. His eyes never left mine. And if you are fortunate enough to recognize it, you never let it go. The ballroom remained silent for several seconds. Then applause erupted. Loud. Genuine. Endless. But the moment I would remember forever came afterward. Noah ran across the room carrying his sketchbook. He stopped directly in front of us and opened it to a new drawing. 3 figures stood beneath a large tree. Him. Vincent. Me. Above them he had written a single word in careful handwriting. Family. Tears filled my eyes instantly. Noah looked up at me and smiled. You stayed. The simple sentence felt more precious than anything else in the room. As applause echoed through the ballroom and city lights shimmered beyond the windows, I finally understood something. The people who tried to break me had only measured my position. They never measured my heart. And sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones the world overlooks until it is far too late.